Dragon Age 2 was rated M for mature by the ESRB and contains blood and gore, language, sexual content, and violence. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello everyone, my name is Amaronith and I play games for the internet, and today we're playing Dragon Age 2. It's been a few episodes, and we're a little bit into the start of Act 2, so it's time for another Codex reading. Starting with creatures. Golem. Once a crucial part of Orzammar's defenses, golems have all but vanished, as the secret to their manufacture was lost over 1,000 years ago. What few golems remain are guarded closely by the Shaperit, brought out when the battle with the Darkspawn grows desperate enough to risk their loss. No one now would sell a golem for any price, but in ancient times, dwarves sold many golems to the Magister Lords of Tevinter. They are devastating weapons in war, living siege engines capable of hurling boulders like catapult or plowing through enemy lines like an earthquake. Pride Demon. Let me explain what it is to face a pride demon, my friends. You may scoff and say that our talents exist only to face mages, but you will encounter demons often. They will be summoned by a Maleficar and bound to do his bidding, and while at times they will be forced into the possession of a host, they will also face you in their true form, a powerful opponent indeed. Do not underestimate it. Pride is powerful and intelligent. When we have encountered one in its true form, its most common attacks are bolts of fire and ice. Fire they will use to burn an opponent, and the magical flame will combust anything you wear, regardless of make. Ice they will use to freeze an opponent in place. Be cautious, for they enjoy employing this against warriors in particular. More than one group of Templars has made the mistake of attempting to overwhelm a pride demon, and suffered the consequences, believe me. And if you think that having the aid of other mages will assist you, you are wrong. Pride demons can render themselves immune to magic for short times, and are adept at dispelling magic that is cast upon you, as much as we Templars are able to disrupt spells. Think on that for a moment, my friends. Be wary of how prideful you become, lest you find too much in common with such a fiend. Transcript of a lecture given by Varric, Templar Commander of Tantervale, 686 Steel. The Profane. We who are forgotten remember. We clawed at rock until our fingers bled. We cried out for justice, but were unheard. Our children wept in hunger, and so we feasted upon the gods. Here we wait in aeons of silence. We few, we profane. Found scrawled on a wall in the lost Primeval Thaig by explorer Faruma Helmi, 510 Exalted, unknown author. Rock Wraith. 20 years in the Legion of the Dead, I've seen spiders larger than a Bronto, brood mothers lounging in pestilence surrounded by their corrupted children, and unnamed Thaigs with flesh turned against itself. But worse, by far, was in an old mineshaft down from Hadron Thaig. We chased an emissary down there to a tunnel dead-ended in rubble. It was a vicious fight. He picked my men off until only 4 of us were left. When it seemed like we'd finally fulfill our oaths, our fight woke something long dormant. What I thought was rubble gathered beneath my feet, taking a terrible form, a beast of stone surrounding the shattered skeleton of a man, a rock wraith. The spirit of a dwarf so foul the stone itself rejected him. One swing of its boulder hand crushed the emissary, and then it turned its eyeless skull towards us. We fled back up the tunnel, its heavy footsteps thundering at our backs. When we reached the Thaig, we finally turned, knowing that out in the open we had no cover, and couldn't hope to outrun the wraith. But when it came to the exit, it struck the trusses holding up the ceiling of the shaft, closing itself in forever. Perhaps, in the end, it felt remorse. Perhaps it was one lost soul recognizing another. From the journals of Emran, Legion of the Dead. Items. Valdasine. In the ancient days before the Darkspawn, when dwarven cities wound through the roots of all the earth, House Valdasine single-handedly kept the empire supplied with Lyrium. One day the mining family shut the doors of their Thaig. They spoke not to their noble patrons, nor their king, and not even a visiting paragon. Days passed in silence before the doors to Valdasine Thaig opened. Anxious partners discovered it empty. Not one soul remained, no bodies, and no sign of what had happened. House Valdasine left only a staff of strange metal behind it. It looked like Lyrium and chilled one's heart like a remembered sorrow. The king sealed the staff inside the Thaig, and no dwarf ever ventured there again, as recounted by Shaper Merta. Places. The Primeval Thaig. Your Majesty, it's difficult getting a straight answer out of the scavenger. These sods get themselves so blighted they can't think straight, much less keep spit in their mouths. He says, however, that he's gone down into the parts of the deep roads that are so old that our people forgot them long before the blight ever even happened. He spoke of great statues and temples. Temples! He spoke of things that could have only been made of magic, and of impossible ruins untouched by Darkspawn. He described the creatures, the likes of which we've never seen. None of it's possible, of course. I've conferred with the Shaper, and he says the memories date back to the founding of the first Thaig. What could have come before that? Yes, we're unable to explore these depths the scavenger spoke of because of the Darkspawn, but surely the memories would speak of such places if they existed. Yet in this scavenger's belongings, amidst all the filth, there was a single idol. It was clearly of dwarven make, but not resembling any paragon on record. The idol was dressed in a manner I've never seen. The Shaper of Memories also could not identify it, or the substance from which it was made. Though the memories might be wrong... The thought that the memories might be wrong is unsettling. Excerpt from a report sealed in the Orzammar Royal Archives by order of King Anilar Geldenblade in 848 Blessed. Lore. The History of the Chantry, Chapter 2. When the prophet Andraste and her husband Mafrath arrived at the head of their barbarian horde, southern Tevinter was thrown into chaos. The Imperium had defended against invasions in the past, but now they stood without the protection of their gods, with their army in tatters and their country devastated by the blight. Many felt that the timing of the invasion was yet another of the Maker's miracles in Andraste's campaign to spread his divine word. Andraste was more than simply the wife of a warlord, after all. She was also the betrothed of the Maker. Enraptured by the melodic sound of her voice as she sang to the heavens for guidance, the Maker himself appeared to Andraste and proposed that she come with him, leaving behind the flawed world of humanity. In her wisdom, Andraste pleaded with the Maker to return to his people and create paradise in the world of men. The Maker agreed, but only if all the world would turn away from the worship of false gods and accept the Maker's divine commandments. Armed with the knowledge of the one true God, Andraste began the exalted march into the weakened Imperium. One of the Maker's commandments, that magic should serve man rather than rule over him, was as honey to the souls of the downtrodden of Tevinter, who lived under the thumbs of the Magisters. Word of Andraste's exalted march, of her miracles and military successes, spread far and wide. Those in the Imperium who felt the old gods had abandoned them eagerly listened to the words of the Maker. Those throngs of restless citizens that destroyed temples now did so in the name of the Maker and his prophet Andraste. As Mafarath's armies conquered the lands of southern Tevinter, so did Andraste's words conquer hearts. It is said that the Maker smiled on the world at the Battle of the Valerian Fields, in which the forces of Mafarath challenged and defeated the greatest army Tevinter could muster. The southern reaches of the mighty Imperium now lay at the mercy of barbarians. Faith in the Maker, bolstered by such miracles, threatened to shake the foundations of the Imperium apart. Of course, the human heart is more powerful than the greatest weapon, and when wounded, it is capable of the blackest of deeds. From Tales of the Destruction of Thedas by Brother Justina V, Chantry Scholar. The Demon's Gift. Before the first blight, there lived an old man and woman. One day, a beautiful stranger came to their house seeking shelter. The old man and woman gave her food to eat and a downy mattress to sleep upon. In return, she offered them a golden mirror that would grant 3 wishes. Looking into the mirror, the woman frowned at her wrinkles and gray hair. "I wish I were young again," she said. Suddenly, the face of a lovely maiden stared back at her. The man angrily grabbed the mirror, saying, "You're so selfish. You could have given us youth to us both. I wish you weren't so stupid." At once the woman was brilliant beyond measure and saw that her husband had never loved her. He tolerated her only because her age and ignorance made his own seem less by comparison. Angry now, the old woman grabbed for the mirror. At the same time they both said, "I hate you. I wish that you got exactly what you deserve." And with that they were back together, both ugly and old, but now knowing exactly how much contempt they had for each other. Thedas Calendar. For most good folk, the details of our calendar have little purpose. It is only useful for telling them when the summer day festival will be held, when the snows are expected to begin, and when the harvest must be complete. The naming of the years are a matter for historians and taxmen, and few, if pressed, could even tell you the reason that our current age is named after dragons. It is 930 Dragon Age, the 30th year of the 9th age since the crowning of the Chantry's first divine. Each age is exactly 100 years, with the next age's name chosen in the 99th year. And Chantry authorities pore over the research for months before the divine announces the name of the imminent age. The name is said to be an omen of what is to come, of what the people of Thedas will face for the next 100 years. The current age was not meant to be the Dragon Age. Throughout the last months of the Blessed Age, the Chantry was preparing to declare the Sun Age, named for the symbol of the Orlesian Empire, which at the time sprawled over much of the south of Thedas, and controlled both Ferelden and what is now Navarra. It was a celebration of Orlesian imperial glory, but as the rebellion in Ferelden reached a head and the Battle of Riverdane was about to begin, a peculiar event occurred. A rampage, the rising of a dreaded high dragon. Dragons had been thought practically extinct since the days of the Navarran dragon hunts, and they say to see this great beast rise from the frostbacks was both majestic and terrifying. As the rampage began and the high dragon decimated the countryside in its search for food, the elderly divine Faustine II abruptly declared the Dragon Age. Some say the divine was declaring support for Orlais in the battle against Ferelden, since the dragon is an element of the Vael Family heraldry of King Magrin, the so-called usurper king of Ferelden. Be that as it may, the high dragon's rampage turned towards the Orlesian side of the Frostback Mountains, killing hundreds and sending thousands more fleeing to the northern coast. The Ferelden rebels won the Battle of Riverdane, ultimately securing their independence. Many thus think that the Dragon Age will come to represent a time of violent and dramatic change for all of Thedas. It remains to be seen. From the Studious Theologian by Brother Justina V, Chantry Scholar. 925, Dragon. If I have counted my years exactly, 930 is when the opening of the game started, when Hawk and his family were fleeing Lothering. 931 is after the year serving the mercenaries, and it's now 3 years after that, so the current date in-game is 934. The Enigma of Kirkwall. Ancient Tevinter lore is hard to come by, but there's history to be had here in Kirkwall, the city once home to the Imperium's slave trade. What answers does Kirkwall hold? Why look here instead of Preventium or Voldorma? The Imperium does not give up its secrets easily. Even with the Magister's centuries dead, our journey is perilous. Here on the docks of the gallows we renew our vows, and should we fail, search for the markings of the Band of Three. A tattered letter found under a cobblestone. It has curious marking and is signed the Band of Three. The Viscount is suspicious, but the bribe was sufficient to gain access to the restricted section of the archives. The money would have been better spent elsewhere, the archives being almost devoid of Imperium-era records. Why can I not speak? When the slaves revolted, they hunted magisters and burned the city, at least the parts that could be burned. One account says that the streets were littered with piles of scrolls and books set aflame. Is our quest futile? Did the slaves destroy the answer? As Mafrath's armies toppled the Imperium, they sent 3 magisters and their legions here. They never arrived, but why march here of all places? What were they coming here for? Behind a panel with the curious markings, signed the Band of Three. It is as we thought. The quarries of Kirkwall were found after the city was sacked by the Imperium, and after they started constructing the city. The Imperium found the mineral wealth, not the indigenous people. The histories give conflicting accounts on who lived here before the Imperium. Some say the Alamari, some say the Dayfads. We know it was a barbarian people who had little need of the metals in the hills. So why did the Imperium come here in such force? It is hard to disprove Brother Mikkel's theory that the natural harbor would be important for their armies, but magisters ruled, not common men. What barrier would a simple sea pose to them? The wars with the Alamari wouldn't start until centuries later. Each clue we find only leads to more questions, but we will not give up. Underneath a pile of small boulders, carved with curious markings and signed the Band of Three. In the back alleys of low towns you can find extraordinary things. Priceless tomes of knowledge can be bought with a handful of gold. The chant of Archon Lovis, a whole chapter of the Midnight Compendium. Some of these books were thought lost forever. And these are no forgeries. I've verified their authenticity myself. The fences have no inkling that what they're selling has value. Where did these books come from? After several failed attempts, I got my answer underneath the city. There is a hive of hidden passages in Kirkwall's sewers. Now and then a lucky sewer rat comes across an unlooted chamber, and a cache of ancient Tevinter relics spreads throughout the black market. We must search below the city, underneath a cobblestone with curious markings, faintly glowing. It is signed the Band of Three. Ironically, the Chantry has the best records on the Imperium occupation that we've found. None of the forbidden texts, which have undoubtedly been destroyed, but many administrative records. In their cold, numbered rows, misery is told. Thousands of slaves pass through the gallows to work the mines or to be shipped elsewhere. The list of elven children is numbing. 3 maimed, 2 mute, and 4 serviceable. These numbers don't add up. For every 1,000 slaves that come to Kirkwall, 100 disappeared. I checked the tax rolls as well, and the discrepancy exists there, too, if one has the wit to see it. 203 slaves went missing in the Imperium's 312th year. That's just 1 year. Other records showed similar discrepancies. Over centuries, practically a whole civilization of slaves simply disappeared, hidden inside the cover of a book with curious markings and signed the Band of Three. Orichalcum. Like Lyrium, Orichalcum is a metal most commonly encountered in liquid form. Unlike Lyrium, however, Orichalcum forms pools and must be drawn like water rather than mined. Deep Orichalcum is the most common type of metal and is often found in places where opals are mined. The rarer crystalline Orichalcum is found in small pools in the mountains. Folk wisdom says that a drop of Orichalcum mixed with wine is a potent aphrodisiac. though it has a pungent smell similar to lye, so I could not bring myself to put this legend to the test. An excerpt from An Alchemical Primer of Metallurgy, Volume 1, by Lord Serestus of Marnus Pell. Deep Roads. There isn't a dwarf alive who remembers the deep roads as they once were. They were a network of tunnels that joined the Thaigs together. To be honest, it isn't even right to give them such a simple term as tunnels. They are works of art, with centuries of planning demonstrated in the geometry of their walls, with the statues of the paragons that watch over travelers, with the flow of lava that keeps the deep roads lit and warm. The cloud gazers up on the surface talk of the imperial highway built by the magisters of old, a raised walkway that crossed thousands of miles, something that could only have been built by magic. Perhaps it is comparable to the deep roads, although we dwarves didn't need magic. I suppose it doesn't matter anymore. The Darkspawn rule the deep roads now. When Orzammar sealed off the entrances to the deep roads, abandoning everything that lay out there, we handed over the kingdom that was to those black bastards forever. To think that there are genlocks crawling over Bonamar now, tearing down our statues and defiling our greatest works. Corruption covers everything we built out there. Every dwarf who goes out and comes back says that it gets worse with each passing year. The foulness spread a little further. And the cloud gazers think that the Darkspawn are gone just because they aren't spilling out onto the surface? Huh. One day, when Orzammar is gone for good, they'll find out differently. Those Darkspawn won't have anywhere else to go but up, and they'll do it. The surface folk will have themselves a blight that will never end. Transcript of conversation with a member of the Dwarven Mining Caste. 890 Blessed. The Vale Family. Before the Vales came to power, Starkhaven was ruled in quick succession by a number of petty warlords. Some were genuine Banorn, but others were little more than bandits. Tired of the constant petty raiding and warfare between Starkhaven and neighboring cities, the original Lord Vael organized a peaceful protest against King Ironfist, the low-born, self-declared king of Starkhaven. Hundreds of Starkhaven's most prominent citizens fasted for 10 days and nights on the steps of the Chantry, their numbers increasing every day. When his soldiers began deserting in droves at this example of piety, Ironfist surrendered his sword to the Templars and left Starkhaven forever. In gratitude, the people of Starkhaven demanded that Lord Vael be king. He refused, however, saying he had no right to that title. He was instead proclaimed Prince of Starkhaven, and his family has ruled there ever since. They remain devout, dedicating at least one son or daughter per generation to become a cleric in the Chantry. Templars. Often portrayed as stoic and grim, the Order of Templars was created as the martial arm of the Chantry. Armed with the ability to dispel and resist magic, in addition to their formidable combat talents, the Templars are uniquely qualified to act as both foil for apostates, mages who refuse to submit to the authority of the Circle, and the first line of defense against the dark powers of blood mages and abominations. While mages often resent the Templars as symbols of the Chantry's control over magic, the people of Thedas see them as saviors and holy warriors, champions of all that is good, armed with piety enough to protect the world from the ravages of foul magic. In reality, the Chantry's militant arm looks first for skilled warriors with unshakable faith in the Maker, with a flawless moral center as a secondary concern. Templars must carry out their duty with an emotional distance, and the Order of Templars prefers soldiers with religious fervor and absolute loyalty over paragons of virtue who might question orders when it comes time to make difficult choices. The Templars' power derives from the substance Lyrium, a mineral believed to be the raw element of creation. God damn it. Mouth, please. While mages use Lyrium in their arcane spells and rituals, Templars ingest the primordial mineral to enhance their abilities to resist and dispel magic. Lyrium use is regulated by the Chantry, but some Templars suffer from Lyrium addiction, the effects of which include paranoia, obsession, and dementia. Templars knowingly submit themselves to this treatment in the service of the Order and the Maker. It is this sense of ruthless piety that most frightens mages when they draw the Templars' attention. When the Templars are sent to eliminate a possible blood mage, there is no reasoning with them, and if the Templars are prepared, the mage's magic is all but useless. Driven by their faith, the Templars are one of the most feared and respected forces in Thedas. From Patterns Within Form, by Halden, First Enchanter of Starkhaven, 880 Blessed. The Fade. The study of the Fade is as old as humankind. For so long as men have dreamed, we have walked its twisting paths, sometimes catching a glimpse of the city at its heart, always as close as our own thoughts, but impossibly separated from our world. The Tevinter Imperium once spent vast fortunes of gold, lyrium, and human slaves in an effort to map the terrain of the Fade, an ultimately futile an ultimately futile endeavor. Although portions of it belong to powerful spirits, all of the Fade is in constant flux. The Imperium succeeded in finding the disparate and ever-shifting realms of a dozen demon lords, as well as cataloging a few hundred types of spirits before they were forced to abandon the project. The relationship of dreamers to the Fade is complex. Even when entering the Fade through the use of lyrium, mortals are not able to control or affect it. The spirits who dwell there, however, can, and as the Chantry teaches us, the great flaw of the spirits is that they have neither imagination nor ambition. They create what they see through their sleeping visitors, building elaborate copies of our cities, people, and events, which, like the reflections in a mirror, ultimately lack context or life of their own. Even the most powerful demons merely plagiarize the worst thoughts and fears of mortals, and build their realms with no other ambition than to taste life. From Tranquility and the Role of the Fade in Human Culture, by First Enchanter Josephus. Lyrium. Lyrium is the king of metals. Beneath our feet it sings. When properly refined, it is a smooth, slightly Lyrium is the king of metals. Beneath our feet it sings. When properly refined, it is a smooth, slightly iridescent silvery liquid. In the hands of the dwarven smith caste, it is mixed with steel to produce indestructible armor and blades that hold an edge for centuries. In the hands of the shaper-it, it becomes a repository for living memories, and some scholars maintain this as evidence that lyrium is itself alive. It finds its most lucrative its application. What? In the hands of the Fumari, who use it in conjunction with baser metals like gold, silverite, veridium, or even iron to produce enchantments. Though mages, of course, consume it in a diluted form to bolster their abilities, this is not recommended. Overindulgence in lyrium can have disastrous consequences, particularly in more concentrated amounts. It is not advisable, for instance, that any reader handle raw lyrium, which in many cases can kill on contact. An excerpt from An Alchemical Primer of Metallurgy, Volume 1, by Lord Cerestis of Marnus-Pell. Frickin' bleh! What the frick is this? It finds its most lucrative its application? What? Game. Demonic possession. Why do demons seek to possess the living? History claims they are malevolent spirits, the first children of the Maker, angry at their creator for turning from them, and jealous of those creations he considered superior. They stare across the veil at the living and do not understand what they see, yet they know they crave it. They desire life. They pull the living across the veil when they sleep and prey on their psyche with nightmares. Whenever they can, they cross the veil into our world to possess it outright. We know that any demon will seek to possess a mage, and upon doing so will create an abomination. Most of the world does not know, however, that the strength of an abomination depends entirely on the power of the demon that possesses the mage. This is true, in fact, of all possessed creatures. One demon is not the same as any other. Demons can, for instance, be classified. Enchanter Brahm's categorization of demons into that portion of the psyche they primarily prey upon has held since the Tower Age. According to Brahm, the weakest and most common of demons are those of rage. They are the least intelligent and most prone to violent outbursts against anything living. They expend their energies quickly, the most powerful of them exhibiting great strength and occasionally the ability to generate fire. Next are the demons of hunger. In a living host they become cannibals and vampires, and within the dead they feed upon the living. Theirs are the powers of draining, both of life force and of mana. Next are the demons of sloth, the first on Brahm's scale that are capable of true intelligence. In its true form, this demon is known as a shade, a thing which is nearly indistinct and invisible, for such is sloth's nature. It hides and stalks, unaware, and when confronted, it sows fatigue and apathy. Demons of desire are amongst the most powerful, and are the ones most likely to seek out the living and actively trick them into a deal. These demons will exploit anything that can be coveted, wealth, power, lust, and they will always end up getting far more than they give. A desire demon's province is that of illusions and mind control. Strongest of all demons are those of pride. These are the most feared creatures to loose upon the world. Masters of magic and in possession of vast intellect, they are the true schemers. It is they who seek most strongly to possess mages, and will bring other demons across the Vale in numbers to achieve their own ends, although what that might be has never been discovered. A greater pride demon brought across the Vale would threaten the entire world. From the Maker's First Children by Badr, Senior Enchanter of Ostwick, 812 Blessed. Beyond the Vale, Spirits and Demons. It is challenging enough for the casual observer to tell the difference between the Fade and the creatures that live within it, let alone be between one type of spirit and another. In truth, there is little that distinguishes them, even for the most astute mages, since spirits are not physical entities and are therefore not restricted to recognizable forms, or even having a form at all. One can never tell for certain what is alive and what is merely part of the scenery. It is therefore advisable for the inexperienced researcher to greet all objects he encounters. Typically, we misuse the term spirit to refer to only the benign, or at least the less malevolent creatures of the Fade, but in truth all the denizens of the realm beyond the Vale are spirits. As the Chant of Light notes, everything within the Fade is a mimicry of our world, a poor imitation, for the spirits do not remotely understand what they are copying. It is no surprise that much of the Fade appears like a manuscript translated from Tevinter into Orlesian and back again by drunken initiates. In general, spirits are not complex, or rather, they are not complex as we understand such things. Each one seizes upon a single facet of human experience: rage, hunger, compassion, hope, etc. This one idea becomes their identity. We classify as demons those spirits who identify themselves with darker human emotions and ideas. The most common and weakest form of demon one encounters in the Fade is the rage demon. They are much like perpetually boiling kettles, for they exist only to vent hatred, but rarely have an object to hate. Somewhat above these are the hunger demons, who do little but eat or attempt to eat everything they encounter, including other demons. This is rarely successful. Then there are the sloth demons. These are the first intelligent creatures one typically finds in the Fade. They are dangerous only on those rare occasions that they can be induced to get up and do harm. Desire demons are more clever and far more powerful. using all forms of bribery to induce mortals into their realms. Wealth, love, vengeance, whatever lies closest to your heart. The most powerful demons yet encountered are the pride demons, perhaps because they, among all their kind, most resemble men. From Beyond the Veil, Spirits and Demons by Enchanter Meryl. Forbidden Knowledge. Tyrone's Book of Blood. Was Dabon Haight one mage or a full cabal? I found another reference to Zebenkek in his black journal. The blood feeds, the blood nourishes. In blood the call is heard, in blood the deal is made. My master bathed in the river of blood. Then the great Zebenkek came. God. Tyrone's Beginning. In 4-2 Black is the oldest account of the Forbidden Ones, though most mages consider them a hoax. But someone has to make that first deal, that first contact with the other side, from the unknown mage's account. The first of the Magus cast themselves deep in the Fade in search of answers and power, always power. They found the Forbidden Ones. Zebenkek, Imshale, Gaxkang the Unbound, and the Formless One. Many conversations were had, and much of the fabric of the world revealed, and thus magic of blood was born. Even those who consider this folly dare not utter these names. We fought Gaxkang. And I think Zebenkek? Did we fight the Formless One? I don't remember. Someone tell me in the comments if you remember from back in Origins, did we fight any of these other than Gaxkang? If we haven't fought them yet, just say we haven't fought them yet. Ooh, okay. Characters. Anders, after the Deep Roads. In the past 3 years, Anders has become more reclusive, verging on paranoid. When not with the champion, he spends his time among the Ferelden refugees in Darktown, healing their ills and counting on their loyalty to protect him from curious Templars. After his friend Carl was made tranquil, then killed, Anders was convinced that the Chantry's entire structure must be overturned to free mages completely from their control. He has joined a group of like-minded apostates who are slowly wearing away Kirkwall's circle by helping other mages escape. The spirit of vengeance inside him has manifested more strongly, making it nearly impossible for him to control himself when fighting Templars. Aveline, after the Deep Roads. Since the adventure in the Deep Roads, Aveline has settled into life as the captain of the guard. She has removed the stain of Captain Devon's corruption and turned the guardsmen into effective enforcers of law and order. Becoming captain of the guard title should have brought Aveline stability, but she has instead found herself taxed by having so many people under her care. She is very protective of the people she commands, to the point of training each guardsman herself and personally reinforcing otherwise simple patrols. Injury rates are lower than ever before, but the guards are beginning to feel smothered. Aveline is utterly dedicated to her job, leaving no time for anything beyond the occasional sidetrack with Garrett. Even that is an excuse to watch over people she cares about. She is guardian in every waking moment, and she doesn't seem to know how to put down the weight she carries. Bethany, after the Deep Roads. Since joining the Grey Wardens, Bethany has had little contact with her family. Resentful that Garrett escaped the Deep Roads unscathed while she nearly died, Bethany communicates only with their mother, relaying little beyond the fact that she is alive and continues to travel with the Warden Stroud. Her responsibilities rarely bring her back to the Kirkwall area. She usually patrols deep into the Free Marches or across the border in Ferelden, the only member of the Hawk family to return to their homeland. Itchy, itchy, itchy. Divine Justina V. Formerly the revered mother Dorothea of Orlais, Divine Justina V rose to power after the death of Divine Beatrix III in the year 934 of the Dragon Age. Oh, so this year. Little is known of Dorothea's background before she joined the Chantry as an initiate. Within the Grand Cathedral, rivals suggest that her reticence in discussing her past means she's hiding something. Few of her flock, however, can imagine her as anyone other than a gentle mother of obvious faith. When Beatrix III was felled by a massive stroke, she survived just long enough to put forth Dorothea's name as a candidate for her replacement. Grand clerics from throughout Thedas flocked to Orlais for the Grand Consensus, a private meeting between the heads of all chantries to select the next divine. Though ritual demanded the decision be unanimous, servants attending the consensus whispered of heated debate over Dorothea's suitability. Her worldly background and demonstrated forgiveness for sinners were held against her. Ultimately, however, the will of Beatrix III prevailed, and Dorothea began her reign as Justina V. Grand Cleric Elthina. We will never have peace unless we try to understand one another. Revered Mother Elthina assumed the mantle of Grand Cleric almost 20 years ago. She is responsible for the spiritual well-being of the southern Free Marches, everything south of Starkhaven and the Menanta River. She has long been a calming presence in the city, renowned for her kindness and generosity. People frequently turn to her to mediate disputes, particularly those involving the powerful Templar order, over whom she holds authority as the Chantry's ranking representative. Some claim that Elthina's advanced age has rendered her ineffective, and that she allows Knight Commander Meredith more leeway with each passing year. Some are calling on the new divine, Justina V, to appoint a replacement, but they do so quietly, for Elthina is by far the most beloved priest the city has ever known. Fenris, after the Deep Roads. Since the adventure into the Deep Roads, Fenris has remained in Kirkwall, maintaining a residence in Daenerys' abandoned mansion. That it doesn't truly belong to him has aroused the interest of curious neighbors, and thus the city guard. Aveline has so far deflected their inquiries on Fenris's behalf. However, she's told him in no uncertain terms that the situation will not remain that way forever. Though seemingly unconcerned about the house, Fenris has become increasingly nervous over the last year. He doesn't know if he's actually free from pursuit, or if his former master is planning something even worse. He tries not to think about it, taking pleasure in having a home for the first time in his life, even though his contact with anyone outside of the jobs he takes as a mercenary is very limited. Isabella, after the Deep Roads. Isabella spent the past several years trying to track down the relic that she lost in the shipwreck. She believed that it's still in Kirkwall, though why she thinks so is a mystery. Despite her insistence that she's keeping a low profile to avoid her old employer, Castillon, Isabella seems to go out of her way to cause trouble. Recently, one of her duels evolved into a bar brawl that then spilled out into Lowtown. Involving over 20 people, the fracas caused a great deal of damage to several merchant stalls. Isabella spent the next 2 weeks in the brig. Guard Captain Aveline allowed her release, but not before extracting a promise that Isabella would not duel on public property again. Whether Isabella actually keeps that promise is remained to be seen. Meryl, after the Deep Roads. It's a keeper's place to remember, even the dangerous things. Since her arrival in Kirkwall's elven alienage, Meryl has had difficulty adjusting. Her neighbors ignore her existence, and even the most determined socialites in Lowtown cross the street to avoid her. She also gets lost frequently, a matter that doesn't seem to be solving itself through time or familiarity with the city. On separate occasions, she has accidentally found herself in the Viscount's bathing room, the Chantry airing cupboard, and the middle of a dog racing track in Darktown. Sebastian, after the Deep Roads. Sebastian has spent the past 3 years advancing his campaign to retake Starkhaven. He has been traveling extensively between Kirkwall and other Free Marcher cities, attempting to recruit sufficient allies to build an army. With Garrett securing the Hawk family's a place among Kirkwall's nobility, the two have crossed paths a few times, but an exiled prince like Sebastian has far better access than Garrett to the Viscount and other heads of state. So far, though, few families have agreed to support Sebastian with actual troops, leaving him in the difficult position of trying to retake the city with no army. Varric, after the Deep Roads. Bianca sends her regards. Bartrand vanished after the Deep Roads expedition, and Varric had to divert his attention from searching for his wayward brother to keeping the now-abandoned family businesses from falling apart. Varric now occupies his brother's seat in the Dwarven Merchants Guild. Technically, he rarely attends guild meetings and is hardly ever seen actually occupying the chair in their hall that belongs to House Tethras. He prefers to run the Tethras financial empire from his suite at the Hanged Man, and he never replies to his mail. Letters and Notes. Flora Horrormans' Diary. First day of Harvest Mere. Mother has finally begun her expansion to the estate today. She brought in 24 men from the Imperium who I'm sure were slaves, and they've been excavating the hillside behind the house. The dirt is awful, and the noise! Must they shatter every rock in Kirkwall? It's been quiet since lunch, though, and Mother is behaving very strangely. She's now talking about stopping the expansion, just like that, with no explanation. She never tells me anything. 10th day of Harvest Mere. Father is behaving so oddly. Today he pinched my buttocks, just reached around the table, and I can't imagine what would make him do such a thing. And to the servant girls as well. Some of the things he says would truly make a sailor blush. I told the maids to lock up the wine, but it hasn't made any difference so far. I'm going to the Chantry tonight to pray for him. 11th day of Harvest Mere. What can be happening? First Father, now Brett. I can't talk to either of them anymore. I don't know what they're drinking, but they are lost in their own little worlds. And Mother doesn't care. Should she even be here? All she talks about is Starkhaven and marrying me off to that idiot Goran Vael. What madness has come over this place? And that is that. Thank you for joining me. And, I will see you next time when we go to the Hanged Man to have a drink with Donick on behalf of Aveline. It's also very middle school. But until then, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.